All right, here we go. Today's the 23rd of March, 22, and I'm Dr. Anthony Basil for COM 520 at Solent University's Computing School, and we're very lucky today to have our honored guest, Obi, who is going to give you a little bit of background about himself, and then share a little bit about his experiences and kind of lessons learned and tips to success as a UX designer and strategist working in America, but having clients all around the world. And just for your context, then, Obi, the majority of the people are in our HCI, our Human Computer Interaction course today. So at the end, I don't know if you do have time for any questions or statements. You know, we'll try to open that up if you've got some time.
Yeah, of course, of course.
Fantastic. Well, let me pass over to you then, sir, and thank you and welcome you to our group.
Okay, thanks, Kate, and really, my apologies for the time taken. We've been trying to do this for a while now. That's why I said no. Let's get it on. No matter what happens, even if I have to go a while, come back and do it today.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So a bit about myself. Can I share my screen? Is it possible?
You should be able to. Let me see if what your status is as a guest. I might need to make you a presenter. Let me see here. No, it says make participant, mute participant. Hold on. Make an attendee. No, you should be okay.
I can see. I can see.
Is it giving you the rectangle with the arrow pointing up that says share?
Yeah, it's giving
Okay,
me
so you have
that.
that.
I think it's asking me to upload. Oh, well, there's a desktop window, um, which I can use. Yep. So I could put it over there, and then I could select something and share. So it should share right now.
Oh yeah, we can see. Yep.
Okay, good. So just a little bit about myself. So I usually describe this as my UX world. So the other screen is on this side, so I keep looking there. But look directly, yeah. So this is a bit of what I am. Whenever people ask me, so who are you and what have you been doing? I tend to just give them a picture. So this is all, and maybe more, the much I remember on the day. So I have been in all of these positions and more. So I'm trying to kind of compress it to something that's easy to understand, which is our story basically. So I started out as an artist, architect, graphic design, even sculpting, things like that, and developed all the way. So my experience with design research and user research started way back many moons ago, like in the 80s. So, and how I describe myself is I've been privileged to transcend both the physical and the digital. So I'm able to flip my mind back and forth and use lessons learned on this side, plow it into the other side, um, which has been a big advantage for me. Um, but with regard to what I want to talk about today in terms of lessons learned, looking at the place of UX and project management, because we tend to focus a lot on the UX side of things. And when things go wrong, most times we think it's basically maybe the design or the people or the visual designer that I don't like or the coder that I don't like or doesn't like me or something, or the customers who are giving us wrong information. And sometimes it's really not all of that. It's just some lapses within the management of the resources and the process, taking people right through it. So the I call it privilege because I couldn't have planned my trajectory. So starting from the built environment
Oops.
facility management, construction, project manager.
Sorry, Obi, I'm going to turn off my video because your image just froze. So it's not
Okay,
that I'm
yeah,
not listening. I just want to save the bandwidth.
yeah. Okay, means even sometimes I turn it off so that it saves the thing. So um, it's been for me enriching having that kind of background that is steeped in design and in execution and in the management of execution, and having this interest in computers because I had, again, was privileged very early in the day as a university student. To my guardian all through university was someone, an IBM veteran who was brought back to set up the computer department in a local university. So I had that privilege of living with that person. You know, when as a child you find yourself in the company of somebody who did this at Rutgers and at Princeton, sat in the classes where Einstein taught, that's a blessing. You can pay for that. So that has been my story. So from the days of Commodore 64, you know, doing design with CAD Pack 64. These are 64 kilobytes of RAM. That's all the computer had. That's my very first computer that I had in my room. It's been an interest that has been growing forever. So going into design school, training, graduating as an architect with a master's degree, going into practice, at some point in time, I developed a kind of a perception for problems we had in those areas of practice that had a lot to do with technology, seeing the opportunities there that we could use technology to enhance a lot of those processes, but not understanding why the entire construction sector was not actually doing that or doing it at the pace that, say, for instance, the aerospace, the manufacturing, the automobile sectors doing those things. And that led me into a PhD from where I started my full journey back to the IT, the digital realm. And my PhD was focused on technology transfer of IT in construction. And basically, I moved beyond the adoption principle or philosophy to look into adaptation. That became my focus. And it was pure UX research. I did that for a number of years. But you know what the PhD does to you? It keeps you there forever. And after that, of course, I couldn't really go back into the ordinary practice of maybe designing and constructing and so on. So I zeroed in more on the IT side of things. I was opportune to stay in the academia. You can see there's a professor written there. So right now I'm an associate professor in school of construction there, University of the Witwatersrand in Johannesburg. And I'm also a US consultant here in the US. I started doing learning experience design. That I did for quite a while. Went into web design. At some point, I was school web editor for like 4 or 5 years. So I continued growing in that regard, and I keep learning and learning. I never stop. So I continued branching more into mobile products and then consulting in the UX field. And I would say that if you placed UX design and research, I would have a problem picking which one to go first. But having done a PhD, and I've been doing research for quite a while now, supervising PhDs and masters and so on. Research is kind of becoming like the first love, but I always do both when I get the opportunity. Now, enough about me, um, but that's the background that gives me what I want to talk about today. I discovered that all the projects that I've been in, there are, of course, myriads of problems. I would always come up with a project. But one of the main issues that I have, this is part of what I did as a PhD guy and so on. Part of what I've noticed is that in carrying out projects, the project mindset seems to be what's not there. And people assume that by having stand-up meetings or using words like we're doing agile, we're doing as a scrum master and a this and a that, that things will go well. And then some people who are, product managers don't really seem to understand what that this is actually a project management position. that you should do. So you find a lot of duplicities going back and forth where the product manager goes down and becomes a designer and doesn't do what it's supposed to do. So I have picked up a number of things with regards to that on one side. And then the other one is about managing the people you work with as you pace yourself up through the process. Because if your position is that of the knowledge base or the subject expert or things like that, it's always a bit difficult conveying the information that you're very sure of and getting people to the point of really accepting it, owning it, so that they now join you in advocating or implementing that thing within that product and the process. Um, it's something that is not an application problem. It's a management problem, even though the project you have is for delivering a particular product, but you need a process that is well managed to deliver that product. And that managing that process requires knowing the resources, allocating them very well, managing this allocation because it's dynamic as you move along all the way through to the end. So sometimes you don't achieve the best product, not because the people in the team could not come up with it, but that the project management of the management of that project in some ways denied that team the opportunity of deriving the best product that they could, deliver. And some of the things I've learned there are the things that I want to briefly share with you. But to share them, I would use a few examples from my own experience. So I would quickly go to something like this. Let me drag this in to the screen and reduce it a little bit. So this is really a learning experience product that is a language primer that I worked on. More or less, it was in 2010 that this started. Of course, from a personal pain point, and then developed into a bigger project. This has about 41 different products that are selling on Amazon that is selling since 2010, and they've always improved. But the issue here is that it started as a personal pain point, of course, with regards to language issues with training children who are in diaspora. They tend to speak the particular language of the wider community where you are. They may not speak your vernacular. And how do you teach that when the child has to go to school and is taught in the common language, not in your vernacular, and only has that exposure with you? So initially, the very first attempt was headed off in different directions. There were two persons working on this project, and what I realized was that we were pulling in different directions. We simply landed on it and started running the project more from an emotional point of view. And it wasn't really going the way it should go until we stopped and went back to the drawing table and reevaluated that mission as a project mission statement, meaning we went back to the normal practice, even a simple checklist, and put it on a project to draw a timeline, determine, delegate headaches and authorities and deliverables, milestones, and all of those, and then determine who should do what. We actually dialogued how to make a decision on anything, where to do a design freeze, where not to, and all of that. And then determining what extent of the job we could do and what part of it we could delegate out. Once we had these things set in place, it didn't stop the differences from coming up, but it resolved them because there was a way that was already agreed upon, which everyone was bound to. I mean, when I say everyone, only two people. And because of this, we were able to develop 41 items that are on sale and haven't had any hitch. from 2010 to 2020, running the same project, producing volumes of that volumes, and always going through research and development. And that is an example, a very simple example of what not having the right project management approach could do to your project, especially when it has to do with design, especially when it has to do with user experience design. Why am I saying that? Because there are two parts to it. There is the experience of the user that you're trying to serve at the end of the process when you launch it. There is also the experience of the team members through the process of delivering the project. If that experience is bad, you can be sure that it will tell on the product, it will tell on its delivery, it will tell on the things that are supposed to happen after that. So that's one of it. The other thing that I can remember now is if I go to something else like this. This is another aid, another primer that has to do with research. At a point in time, I was managing the research degree in a school, in the university, and I had to redesign the entire research degrees program that dealt with about 3 or 4 streams, the multidisciplinary approach, and handling PhDs and MScs by research, not the coursework. And how did I go through this? This issue had to do with a lot of people involved. In a university, you will know that you have the supervisors who are some other professors and senior lecturers and all of that. You have the admin staff, you have the students you're trying to serve. Then you have the faculty that administers above the school and the wider university authority that determines where you're going in the first place. I had to walk through all of this to achieve the changes. And why is it important to bring it up? Because to redesign a huge program like that, that delivers the research degrees for a school of 3 streams, you are going to step on so many toes. You are going to, change things. You're going to rock the boat, as they say. There are so many potential things that could potentially come out raw, or pro, or go up in flames. So many potential crises here and there, possible misunderstandings and people, feeling threatened and this and that. And you need some of these people as part of your team to run things in the process of changing the existing program. And while you are running this, the old one is still running while you're trying to change it. While that sounds difficult, what I picked up from that experience was that if in your project management, you actually understand that this is a project, that project mindset I'm talking about, and understand who your stakeholders are at every stage in the project. You can put all the stakeholders in a room, and they would include the people you're working with, the users at the end of the day, the owners, the charter owners, the funders, everybody. But if you're also able to break down your project into stages and know who your stakeholders are, stage by stage, you will know whom you are serving the most at each point. Okay, that way I was able to speak to the particular, let me call them key stakeholders at every point in every stage in the project. And I was able to deliver this. It took me about 2.5 to 3 years, but it's delivered now and they're running it and I've moved on. Hence, now I've been thrown again into the deep end of being the UX strategist for student and staff learning experience, which brings me closer to what you're doing because we've been running remote learning now on an interventionist mode for about a year. And now we're going into full blended learning approach. Okay, and that sits on my desk to run. And on top of that, I have a mandate to transform the curriculum. It was supposed to be curriculum review, and as I'm going into it, maybe 1 month or 2 months into it, it changes to transform it completely. Okay, let it become internationally and locally relevant at the same time. So these are goalposts that are shifting, things that are changing as I go along. And while I'm doing this, I need to keep the teaching and learning mode, environment stable as we're going along. And we have a lot of factors working in some, the vaccine, people are coming in, restrictions here, people are on the campus, some are there, some are not there. There's a lot of misinformation and all sorts of things going on. But I have to deliver this project within this situation. Now, again, it involves a lot of e-learning, design, redesign, change of mindset, and all of that. There are people who like the chalk and talk, plain and simple. Give them the chalk, they go to the blackboard. There are gurus there. They can do the job there. But and they don't want to hear anything about any other approach, whether it's good or bad, simply because it's difficult for them to sort of, change. And when the change is coming very quickly, you're not giving them time to digest it and to move along with the pace. It's also a problem. So sometimes you can't really blame people. You need to kind of pace them through it. But you also need to deliver things in time. And you have a lot of pushbacks, and there are funding issues and all of that. Now, those things are all factors, but I have absolutely no reason for not delivering because my mandate is to deliver. So what do I do? So far, because what I'm talking about is still quite current, it's ongoing. But I can share with you the lessons I have learned, especially because it has a lot to do with e-learning design, because the blended mode has a lot of e-learning approaches shifted into it. What I had to do was to take time to do my stakeholder analysis, understand it, and this is from lessons I've learned before, understand that, and then look at who the key stakeholders are at each stage in this project, because I've put it down to a project with a short-term, mid-term, and long-term approach. And once I determine who I'm serving to, who I'm selling to at each point in time, I build that into my project management. So my main focus at this stage is to meet up with these milestones that sell to this particular stakeholder group, and that gate opens for me to move forward. So to speak, I'm determining who my user is at each point in the project and what product that user needs from me for an okay at each point in the project. That for me is a big lesson there. And that had to be done because without doing it, I've run around in circles, having endless meetings, trying to convince people, having a lot of pushbacks, and not making any progress at all. So you can imagine when it has to do with issues such as digital accessibility, that to quite a lot of people, to them, is very new. Many assume that the way they use the computer or digital products, that same way everybody uses it. They really don't have that much of, not that they're insensitive, but it's not in your psyche, it's not in your mental models about, thinking through that this person that's blind actually might need more than I do. Thinking that the simple dictation or whatever works, not understanding the different challenges, physical, cognitive, and so on, that people live with, and the demands and implications of all this. That we have students who have these, staff members who have those sorts of needs. So all of these things, and I'm bringing them into what I'm doing now. It's a big challenge selling all of those things. But if you map out who you're selling to at any point in time, it makes it easier. Part of mapping your project stages to key stakeholders, it also enables you to know the sort of information you need to feed them in a timely fashion to kind of prime them, prepare them to face the design decisions that you're going to need their support for. So within this year alone, there have been a number of workshops and trainings, even starting from last year. And all of this is simply to prime different groups and so on so that you get their support as and at when you need it, and that you go along, the ownership begins to take place in their own minds and so on. So you get that support. So I've had a number of workshops, training, even with people. Last time, somebody from Sweden was the facilitator, the main speaker, took us through, and we've had people from different areas, and all of that is not necessarily like they're training us and then I say, okay, yes, now we need to do this. No, simple. We're just educating each other, informing each other so that our mindset changes, so that at the time when I need this design decision made, I have more support. And at the same time, you have to do the same thing with management as well, and it's across board. But the main thing is, what I've learned there is this: having the project mindset, mapping the stages, determining who the key stakeholders are at each stage, and finding out the kind of information and the way they need, the way you should fashion that information to feed them, so that when you need those decisions at those gates, you have those things. And there's, compromise here and there so that you can move forward with them. They would agree to also prepare themselves, because part of this project is also upskilling staff to be ready to deliver on the new curriculum once it's done. So all of these have been I've been talking now based on things like products like this, learning products and programs and processes. But let me veer off to something completely a digital product. Last year, I was privileged to work with a team for a startup here in the US. A startup I think is based in Toronto, but their business is between Canada and Singapore. They are working in indoor air quality monitoring. So basically, it's founded by, I think, a chemical engineer and an engineering designer, and they, I think it's from her PhD. So she developed this and patented it and developed it into a business where she provides, uses IoT sensors to monitor basically what I would do in facilities management, in the area of facility sustainability or building performance. So you stick sensors all over the place that monitor things like carbon dioxide production and death rate, how stuffy it is, air exchange, temperature readings up and downs. So all of those things will be in the building, that people who have laboratories, who have storage areas, who do indoor gardening, indoor farming, all those sorts of delicate things, and also huge facilities where the building indoor air quality and the building performance is monitored centrally. So this is the business that they're going into. They're still quite early in the day. I think about 2 or 3 years into it, still picking up funding. So it's not as if they've arrived, at the big place where they're in the billions or something like that. So we had to do this job of redesigning the onboarding system because it had a problem, and we needed to figure out what the problem was and then go through the whole design thinking process and fix it. Now, I was working with a team that was spread around the world. At that time, I was moving between, like I always do, between South Africa and the US. So part of the project, I was in South Africa, part of it, I was in the US. And other people, somewhere in the US, somebody was somewhere, is it Florida, Chicago, also spread all over the place. None of us were in the same place. And then the client was in Singapore at the time. Now, and this team was a new team. We have, before that time, I never worked with each other. And so we suddenly find ourselves a team of four, and we had to work. So I knew, after looking at the profile of everybody, because of that project mindset, I knew that I was the person with project management, like hardcore project management training coming from the School of Construction. And this would be a strength area that I had to give it to the team without necessarily imposing myself. So while the team wanted to take off and start, fixing the problems here and there, I subtly presented the idea of group formation. Let us form the group. Let's get to know each other's strengths and everything, and decide how we're going to present ourselves in a very professional manner to this client so that we earn their trust. That kind of approach works because we were able to do that job. And but what I picked up from there was that it wasn't really uh, about the the capacity we had, our training experience and all, because one person is a visual designer, the other person is coming from a photography background. So again, a visual person that's quite professional in that field. The other person's, I think, a paralegal researcher. So in terms of researching facts and figures, yes. And here I'm coming with my own varied background. So to synergize all of this required that sort of thing. Again, you see me mapping the project and determining who my key stakeholders were at the point in time. And the very first stage was the team members. Even though we actually didn't name one person to be the team head, we eventually agreed, that kind of engineers, that we agreed on situational leadership, and so that we could now run the team. And once we had that, then the next challenge was to move forward to the client. So that's the next thing I learned as well. When it was time to deal with the client, it's a client from an engineering background as well, and we were also not necessarily um, from that kind of, yeah, I'll be the only person who would have that claim of being from an engineering background. So we didn't have access to to the to we didn't have access to the to the coding team, the rest of the team. We didn't have access to them. We only interfaced with the CEO, who was the engineer there, and it was a bit kind of challenging to get these things across, and understandably. So again, we had to devise what to sell at this point in time, which was a crash course in UX design and what it required and everything. And that gave us an opening. So from there, we now could access a number of things. Still, we didn't have that much of access to that engineering side. And so what we devised again was to devise an approach where every consultation we had with the client was kind of a sort of interview, from where we were learning what was going on. So we kept on having conversations almost 2 or 3 times a week. And I was setting up interview questions that were laced inside the conversation so that we get what we want from the client, because we had a short time frame to deliver on this. And we had the job as well to keep our client happy. Okay, because if client walks away, then we have no job to do. So you also have that kind of situation where you will notice that it behoves you to work everything into your project management approach so that you get what you want, and at the end you're able to deliver. One of my big lessons there, again, that if you are able to understand your project management stages and you map it to the key stakeholders you have at each point, and you know exactly what to sell to them and how to sell it, you would move forward, because at the end of the day, we were able to determine what the problem was, that the whole onboarding process had 3 stages that were distinct, but they couldn't really see it that way. And by the time we redesigned the whole thing, that there's a company representative, then there's the company, and then there's the building that is monitored. So you onboard the representative, onboard the company, onboard the building. And we had that, and they were more than happy. And we even moved forward to propose a mobile version because they were still operating on the website. So at the end of the day, they were so happy with everything we've done. We got a lot of honorable mentions, and that started out as a very difficult thing for us to tackle. And if we had gone head on, no, we need this. If we don't have this, we can't. What we did was go back, look at our project staging, determine who the client, who the key stakeholder would be, or stakeholders would be at that point, and what they needed from us for us to make the design decisions and move forward. Not necessarily for us to tip the design decision in any direction, just to have the process moving forward. Okay. And once we had that, we could move forward. But remember that in this case, I had to start that process on my team in the very first place. So it started from me being sensitive, applying this principle, getting my team on board, and then we all now did this as a group collectively and achieved aims. And that's purely on a web app, which is now under reconstruction and will go for a mobile uh, app. Um, well, lastly, let me just talk about a consultancy that I had recently, I think in November last year, which was basically usability heuristic studies anyway, not so deep. And it was, I think, a government site or an NGO, I think it's a government site. And the way it happened is that there's a representative of, of that establishment, I don't want to mention the name, that came to me and with with that, I think I'm going to stop sharing my face. With that representative coming to me, we broke out the job, discussed it, and I had to advise on the way forward. And the way forward was to do a heuristic study of that site. Of course, nobody had done this before. Usually, they get a web designer to just design, based on what he or she feels. The research that should go into it hardly happens. And so when the problems come up, then you now come in there and you see tons of stuff that simply don't work. Of course, if I took any one of you to look through the site, you probably just say, X, let's just develop a new site, because in terms of ACI, it will literally fail and fail and fail. So, how I handle that and the lesson I learned from there is that and it goes to that last project I talked about, when you have an establishment, a corporate body, entity, not a human being that owns a business that you're working for, you will have to recognize that that person who is representing that corporate entity has a lot of influence in the way things go, depending on where they are placed. If the entity trusts them whole and entire and hands over the decision making to them, then they become your key stakeholder and you have to sell to them. But if you find yourself in a situation where the powers are kind of shared, where that person is actually interfacing and still has to get approval from management on a higher level, then it is important for you to seek to involve that management somehow in the process so that early on you get the buy-in that you need before moving forward. I learned that hard lesson because I found out something that was really more important. They had two websites, a main website and another one. And I found out that the other one was really working, but had some issues that had to do with accessibility issues, a lot of that, and also had some issues to do with some aspects of usability. So I did a thorough study on that site immediately, brought it out, and contacted them and said, look, I've looked at this, the main site. It seems to be better than the sub. I've already done the study on it. And these are all the things that could be done there. Before I go into the other one, that's a smaller site. And the middle person was excited and said, "Oh, no, no, I'm going to pull in my boss. That's what I wanted." So that she was all for it, and then they'll help to approve it so that you actually have two jobs to do instead of one. Now, when this manager appeared in the meeting, went through everything, she promptly thanked me for doing all that and said, "But this is the one we want. That one that we talked about at the beginning. That's the one we want you to do." So, well, I end up doing two jobs, okay, because now the issue of public relations comes in. Are you going to walk away or something? So, what I learned from that particular one is you make sure that at these stages again, determine very early on who the key stakeholders are and what to sell and who to sell to and what to involve at the very beginning. Like in this case, I learned the hard way. So all in all, what I could say is there are so many lessons to learn in the project management area of things. And there's usually this issue about you hear lean UX, agile UX, this, that. Sometimes they become just words that people are saying. People have stand-up meetings, you have a scrum master, you have this, you have that, you have that. The principal thing here is to understand that you have a process to deliver something. You have resources, you need to allocate them. It is time specific, but you have stages, you have stakeholders, and you need to know what to sell at each stage to move forward. Hence, a lot of communication really is key. People relating to people at the end of the day is key. There's quite a lot, but I think let me stop.
No, Obi, that is great stuff. Wow, wow. Thank you so much. If people want to do their online applause, you can do that, or the clapping and all that sort of thing. Go ahead, you can do that. Or if you want to put any notes or comments into the text chat, please feel free to do that. I'm going to stop the recording for this part because we'll open things up for questions, but I'll make that like a separate recording because there was some real